Good evening and welcome back to the second half of our fourth show. First of all, I want to express my gratitude for all of you who are here tonight, the crew of 7 people that are making this show possible, and the audiences that have been following us very closely. It's really encouraging, and we're here tonight to start talking about where does the power come from to change the rules that need to be changed. And in the tail end of the first half of the show this evening, we were looking at a young woman named Kimberly Ellis, who just ran for the chair of the California Democratic Party. She was a newcomer to the scene, and she, with 3,200 delegates voting, she missed becoming chair by only 52 votes. She had an agenda that wanted to reduce the amount of power of the chair, get rid of superdelegates, get back to organizing on the streets, no big expensive ads, basically get corporate funding out of our politics. And it raised a lot of questions and a lot of possibilities about how we might take our political organizing strategies into restructuring the parties so that they became far more responsive to what our real needs are. So this evening, I have a guest, Nancy Abbey, here, who is a long-standing leader in the People's Democratic Club here in Santa Cruz. And in that capacity, we put together a slate and called all over California to support Kimberly Ellis with her new strategies. So in order to get the conversation started, I'd like to just take a few minutes and explain just what the chair of the California Democratic Central Committee does and how she, hopefully, but this time it was a he, gets elected. First of all, there are 3,200 delegates. They are the governing body of the California Democratic Party. And together, these 3,200 delegates elect the chair, and this chair has extraordinary powers. He, or hopefully she, appoints every chair and every member of every one of the 40 committees that run the platform, fundraising, endorsements, campaign strategies, how money will be spent. And that money isn't just spent in California. We have people coming from all over the country because we're also the richest state and a state that is heavily democratic. So it has tremendous influence. And that person in that role also has informal powers of affecting the futures and funding of the electeds of California. So it's a really powerful position to make a difference. We did our best to elect this person, and I want to take just a moment to say how our delegates are put together. Of the 3,200, roughly a third of them are superdelegates. They are elected officials and nominees to parties, and each gets to appoint up to 6 people each. Those are the superdelegates. They don't get elected. The second source, a third of them, are appointed by county central committees. There are 58 counties. Each of them have a delegate, and then they have further delegates based on their population. And the last third, only the last third, are the ones directly elected by registered members of the Democratic Party. That's 14 in each of 80 assembly districts. 7 women, 7 men in each district. And if you are a registered Democrat and you happen to show up on the designated Saturday morning when there's a 2-hour window, you can go and you can help elect who 1/3 of the delegates will be. So what happened this past time is the Burnocrats are sometimes called, but the folks that really wanted to see change and were really supportive of Kimberly Ellis, we were calling all over the state. We were doing serious political organizing. And even though she was a newcomer, we came that close to electing her, and she in turn would have dismantled that power. So this evening, as we're looking at fundamental changes to rules, not only government laws, but rules elsewhere that make a huge impact on the systems we're in and how do we change those systems, I've invited Nancy Abbey in to talk both about possible structural changes to the Democratic Party and how we might achieve those through good organizing, and looking at one more rule change, this time it is a change in law, in the state of California that would try to reverse the damage that Prop 13 has done to us. So Nancy, thank you so much for being here this evening. You are someone that I have long admired your leadership and have great affection for, so I'm just delighted to have you on the show this evening.
Well, I really like what you say about inside, outside, because I believe political change will come not just from resisting and being angry with the Democratic Party, and of course I'm just going to talk about one side of this equation, but it also, you have to get inside the party to make a change. I tried to impress a lot of people when they were becoming discouraged with the party because of the Bernie fiasco. And I explained to them, come join the People's Democratic Club. Help us get more representation within the Democratic Party. But at the same time, form a Bernie club and fight for everything you can. Put that pressure on the outside as well as on the inside. And that certainly happened historically so often. I mean, the Socialist Party in the 30s didn't win diddly squat, but they certainly changed the conversation. And so I think that's what people can do to change the Democratic Party. I'd love to think a third party could come up, but until we have ranked choice voting, I don't think that's going to be realistic.
And you want to say just a little bit more about your last comment about ranked choice voting? What is that, and how could that make a difference?
Ranked choice voting is very hard to explain.
That's true.
Except if you want to vote for a third party candidate, you don't lose your vote because you rank the candidates first, second, third. It depends upon the number of number of candidates. And if you are voting for a third party person and you put them up first and they don't win, then your vote goes to the second.
Your second
choice. Yeah. So, as I say, it's hard to explain, but it really, I think, would change the whole dynamic of the impossibility of third parties becoming an effective electoral force.
Another thought, you and I haven't talked about this before, but it keeps coming up for me. If, say, within the party, enough people hung in there as insiders and putting pressure from the outside, and we got more and more really politically organized, just as we do when we show up, we're upset with the laws. Mm-hmm. We showed up to revamp the structure of the party, and we recruited people to do that and so forth. And we got really, really well organized to do it. And we still didn't succeed. We might actually succeed, but if for whatever reason we still didn't, it seems to me that that organizational structure would actually lay the basis for a very solidly organized third party. We could, like, if it will, walk out together, taking a very well-organized structure, if it came to that. So it's kind of either way. Either we succeed in moving the existing party in the direction of really representing the people, the kinds of things that Kimberly Ellis was talking about, or if for whatever reason we can't do that, we've actually laid the groundwork for a truly effective third party, especially if we've got the instant runoff voting.
Yes.
Or the ranked choice
voting. Yes, that would help. Having been a child of socialist parents, and watching them vote for Norman Thomas, time after time, and not having his never winning. I just don't have a lot of faith in third parties until we get the ranked choice voting or the other. And that then is a possibility.
Got it.
But people hate to hear this, but these things take a long time.
Yes.
And a long time.
And I want to mention, because I remember in the book, not getting to S, the
S word.
The S word, thanks. The S word, where he retraces how Abraham Lincoln was in communication with Marx and how there were
Right.
all these socialist innovations going on. And the reason we have county parks and swimming pools and libraries and all these things we take for granted, even though the Socialist Party didn't win as a party, they won big time as an influence. And that's why we have the Bank of North Dakota when we talked about public banking a couple of weeks ago. So in a way, if we're well organized enough and we focus on the right targets, it's kind of win. We can win a couple of different ways if we're doing that.
So we can win on issues, or we can win on candidates, you're saying?
We can win on issues or candidates if, as in the earlier part of our show, we have an understanding of what the larger picture is. How are all these things connected, and where are the changes that will actually have
Right.
the impact? And they can be individual issues, but meanwhile, we're looking out for what else is going on and making sure that we connect the dots.
And I think that's very important in the campaigns that are going on now to swing left, to swing the party. Because I see people focusing on getting Democrats rather than getting good progressive, if I'm allowed
Yes.
to use that
Yeah.
word, progressive Democrats.
Yes.
And
yes.
a lot of Democrats are worse choices for me than some Republicans. It
Yes.
isn't necessarily that clear cut. I mean, that's kind of even silly to say it so
We can win
obvious,
the
but-
election without winning our agenda.
Right, we have.
Yes, indeed, all too often.
We've done more than once, yes.
So we have a question in the audience, comment?
Actually, a couple of comments, and I want to,
I think you need a microphone, sir.
thank you. And I want to be, disclosure, I'm kind of from the outside, I'm a Green Party member. And I want to talk about the role of third parties historically and how it fits into IRV. If we go
Instant
back-
runoff voting, IRV, what we were
Correct,
talking
yeah,
about, right.
Instant runoff voting or ranked choice voting. Historically, the role of the third party would be to go ahead and raise, to provide a barometer for where there is popular support for some issue that the two major parties are unwilling to do. You name the issue, whether in
They're the risk
various kinds
takers.
so they highlight these issues. But in the modern times, the third party has taken on a different role and a very insidious role. So that, for example, today, when it appears that there might be a razor-thin vote between the two major parties, then one of the major parties will try building a third party to detract from the other party. So, for example, in 2000, when you had the Republican Party supporting the Green Party in order to affect some of the, to take away from the Democrats. So, IRV defeats that insidious tactic. It means that we amplify the ability of third parties to highlight these issues that are not yet adopted and to put pressure on the two major parties to adopt the marginal issues that are getting more popular support while defeating the ability of the manipulators to go ahead and to rig the vote. So anyway, I just wanted to make that. I think third parties have a very important role in shaping the two-party platform, but only if we can get back to not having to manipulate it as was done in the 2000 election.
Well, and I think the only danger with that, Ray, is that because we don't have instant runoff or ranked choice voting, that people will vote in defiance rather than for the person who will most closely meet their needs or their issues. It's certainly not a perfect system, and I just don't want to discourage people from voting. I don't even know how to say it, but I know so many people were toying with not voting for Hillary and maybe didn't vote for Hillary, that allowed, what's his name, to be in the White House now. You know, I mean, she did win the popular vote, but still.
So what I think I'm hearing, I want to put out for
Yes,
our
you
audience.
may say it better than I
Well,
might
I don't
say
know
it.
that I will, but it's three things are surfacing to the question, well, what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
What should we do? And I'm hearing one of the things you're saying is show up at Democratic club meetings and start influencing where that party goes, where it goes in terms of our platform, who we nominate, and how we're structured, because we could rewrite the rules. We could rewrite the bylaws.
And let me just intervene there. The reason is because the more members we have, the more representatives we get to
At
the
the
party
state level.
meetings.
At the party meetings. Got
Yes.
it. Got it. Perfect.
For every 25 or 20 people, we get one representative. And I consider us the progressive, if you'll excuse the expression again, the progressive club in the community, and the one that's ready to push for social change.
So show up, get active. If you're frustrated, turn the frustration into what you would like to see change and organize to make those changes. The second thing I'm hearing is there's a serious movement locally and the Bay Area, even maybe California-wide, to start introducing instant runoff voting. So get involved in that campaign, and we'll put some information on our website about that. We've got a very, very strong, well-organized movement here in Santa Cruz working towards that. And the third thing I'm hearing say is, a third thing from the audience is, with respect to third parties, make the most of them, but in the end, don't step back from voting where whatever the real choices are at that point. Step in and make the best of what you've got at that point. And meanwhile, keep trying to work around so that you end up with better choices
I know
in the end.
I feel kind of wishy-washy saying that, but I think that's just reality of the politics as they stand now.
In the end, in the present, we have to choose between what's available in the present.
And sometimes that's the lesser of
And
two evils.
meanwhile, also along with that, be working towards more choices in the
Right.
future, which
Right.
is perfect. Excellent.
I think the thing that the Democratic Party throughout the United States and in California isn't doing is listening to the voice of the young people. There is a groundswell, or was a groundswell, of interest in this last election that should have been listened to. And some of our delegates to the National Convention were humiliated by the lack of respect that was shown to this large group of representatives, of delegates, by the Clinton campaign, or that was their perception of what was happening.
And I'm thinking we've got history in this country and elsewhere of successful organizing in the past that have achieved things. And so the more frustrated it is to be dismissed and disregarded, motivate even more strategic organizing to make change, looking at what, in fact, we know does work.
Right.
And learning from each other and supporting each other in how to do that. The other thing that I wanted to talk with you about is, as an example, the focus isn't just on who we elect. It's also on what rules we pass, particularly in a state like California, where we get to write some of our own rules during each election. And sometimes we write some really bad rules and sometimes some really good ones. So let's go back to Prop 13. I know that you've been really interested in how to go back and rewrite that bit of history.
Right. I'm sure everybody knows Prop 13 and Howard Jarvis bill, which protected homeowners from having municipalities keep raising their property tax.
Especially people on fixed incomes where that was their
Right.
only
And it was a real,
housing
it
and
was a
stuff.
real concern for seniors, and it did protect seniors, because as long as you didn't sell your home, as long as you didn't buy a new home, or as long as you didn't remodel, which I did, your taxes stay the same. When I bought my property for $31,000,
Here in Santa Cruz?
yes, a
Oh,
long
my
time ago,
goodness.
obviously, I paid $120 a year in taxes. And then years later, I built a granny unit, and it it quadrupled. So this is, I mean, in a way, that's okay. You know, I've decided to do this. I'm helping to pay for the roads and the sewers and the water and
And the
libraries and the schools. Fine, that works for me. That part works. What doesn't work for me is that corporations, entrenched corporations, have been able to dodge paying property tax for years.
Are you kidding me?
No, because if they can manage to transfer businesses to another entity without selling the building, the property, they're not assessed, not reassessed. They maintain the assessment they had when the property was bought. So billions of dollars are lost in the process. And
I just have to
I
note
just-
one thing. The person, if corporations are persons, they are persons who never die. They're immortal.
well, yeah, I'm not sure that's the thing here, but we just put on a slide that shows the before and after. The share of all property taxes paid by corporations before Prop 13 was 44%.
That was 1970, what?
73, I believe.
73.
And homeowners' share was 56%. Now, after Prop 13, corporations are paying 28% and homeowners 72%. And that they are not taking their fair share of the responsibility for the state.
And meanwhile, the funding for our schools has gone down to 47th in the nation.
Yeah,
From
right.
one of the most well-funded schools in the past, we're now near the bottom.
Right, right. And it cuts into so many of the services that we have and our infrastructure, and it's all the things that state taxes pay for.
Property taxes.
Yeah. And so the burden is on the homeowners. The League of Women Voters and some other organizations are putting out a ballot. They're going to start gathering signatures to put it on the ballot mid-March. And they have to have the 25%, I think it is, by April 24th, to close this loophole for corporations.
How would they do it?
Well, corporations would be assessed every 3 years.
Ah.
So that
like
as
it,
their
I like
property
it.
gains, and they use this, this gain in property value.
Right. As an asset. They put it on
Yes,
their books as
right,
an asset.
Right. And so this way, they would actually be taxed on it.
Cool.
This would not affect homeowners, it would not affect renters, it would not affect small businesses. Right now, small businesses have a hard time competing with corporations because a small business startup pays taxes based on the current value. And they have to compete with
Got
a
it.
corporation that is paying taxes on the assessment in
From
1973.
1973. Okay, we have just a couple minutes left. Do we have any questions or comments from you? Yes, Lindsay.
Thank you, ladies, both. On the subject of small businesses, I was wondering what your positions are regarding the deep restrictions that the EPA is putting on our local small businesses and making it some great financial challenges for them. And also your opinion on the minimum wage hike and how that influences small business and also creates a very, very significant challenge for them. Thank you.
You've got 1 minute. You better come up with some good answers.
Well, I don't think I
Thank you,
can.
Lindsay.
I'm sorry to pass on that, but I don't think I would come from a very educated position. Do you have background in that?
I do not. I do not.
I really apologize for not being able to
But why
answer
don't
it,
you,
but I don't want to answer
Lindsay,
it with a
why
bunch
don't you
of-
say just a little bit more about your understanding of it? What do you understand and what's been your experience or concern?
My experience and concerns are my husband and I, Jimmy, we own a local small business here in town, and You know, there are a lot of arguments about the minimum wage increase, but from where we stand, it's paramount to crippling
It would put you out of
our
business.
income and putting
Yeah.
us out of business. And also, as small business owners, the other thing is that, you know, you raise the minimum wage and the cost of living just goes right along with it. It doesn't solve anything. The cost of fuel, the cost of housing, the cost of healthcare just goes right along with it. So you seem to be in support of minimum wage increase, and I was just wondering what your opinions are on the 3 points I just made.
You have another yes. Jimmy, hold on. Did you want to comment on that, Jimmy?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, so owning a small business, we have 5 employees. What they get on their paycheck with that wage hike is maybe $20 every 2 weeks. But that means millions of tax dollars for the federal government and for the state government, which they sell this tax hike to people by saying we're trying to give you more money to live on. But actually what you're doing is going to end up with a couple of college kids that work for us eventually being laid off. And I'll just work there all the time.
Got it.
to
I'm going to rush you a
survive.
bit because we just
Yeah.
have a minute left. We have one more comment from the.
I say one of the proposals,
Thank you.
one of the ways that this issue is sometimes addressed in some legislation is that oftentimes new legislation that is costly will be imposed on businesses depending upon the number of employees they have, so that when it's first introduced, it'll be imposed on businesses with 500 employees or more, then down to 100 employees or more, then down to 20 employees or more, 5 employees or more, and then finally any employees. And that way you can graduate these changes in. And whether or not that should be done in the minimum wage context is something really good to debate.
Okay, I'm going to note there might be hardship provisions, et cetera, that good legislation comes from people from many perspectives coming together and together figuring out what would work for everyone. That may be doable. Thank you all for this evening. It's been a great conversation as always. We look forward to seeing you at our next show in in April, where we'll be talking about changing the politics, changing the conversation. Thank you so much.